welcome to episode 5 of Life in Perspective. Now, I used to call this Life in Perspective because I think at its heart, that's what most of us are searching for. Not answers, not perfection, but just a way of stepping back and asking why. Why do we do what we do? Why some things stick and why others fall away? And why certain habits quietly shape us over time. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So today isn't about big achievements or dramatic transformations. It's about the small things, often invisible things, hobbies, routines, and practices that we can return to when no one's watching. Whether it's reading, training, learning, showing up, not out of obligation, but because something inside us needs it. And so today I brought to you somebody that is close to me, somebody that I genuinely admire, and not because they shout about the discipline or the self-improvement, but because they live it constantly, consistently, and quietly over time. And I think there's something important in that. And so without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my good friend and longtime brother, Malcolm Clark. Malcolm, welcome.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for having me on the show, my man. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for joining us. It's a privilege to have you here. And as I said, you've had, we've spoken a couple of times now on your podcast, and I've spoken about the influence and impact and that you've had on my life. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on and talk about is around the quiet discipline that you go about every day with your life, and it might be something that you might feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about, perhaps, or maybe a little embarrassed about. But I think it's something that's inspired me over the years. And as I said, Life in Perspective originally started off as a photography show, so I was taking pictures of things, primarily photographers, because you see their pictures, but you don't normally see who takes the picture. And then I use that to kind of like frame different parts of life. And more recently, I turned it into a podcast. And so that's why I wanted to bring you into it.
I hear that. I hear that. I like that. Okay.
So I guess,
So,
yeah,
sorry, go for it. Go for it, my man.
yeah, I guess what I wanted to kind of talk to you about is the hobbies and routines and what they look like to you in real life.
Jeez, where do I go? Well, as soon as we talk about routines, training comes to mind for me. So, your workouts. So whether it's at the gym or at home, but most of my training, as you'll know, has been based at home.
Yeah,
And I, to be honest, what comes to mind straight away is, you mentioned at the start about it being like a quiet, quiet discipline, what I've sort of stuck to without shouting about and whatnot. And what actually come to mind was probably down to me not thinking it's acceptable to sort of show off. I mean, I was never sort of taught that growing up. I've never sort of liked to show off, if you get what I mean. So what I started off doing was, just training for, the sake of training, getting in shape and whatnot. As much as I wanted to show off at times, but for me, it's always a thing that, you keep it, you get on, and you do it by yourself. You do it for the benefit of doing it. And then growing up, I sort of realized it's not the sort of thing I need to show off. It's a routine. I sort of have the motto I keep to myself, like training is, or exercise is for life, workouts are for life. So that's like my motto. I don't train for a holiday. I don't train for an occasion. It's like my ongoing motivation is to work out for life. Because I sort of feel like if we do it for an event, once we hit that event, then we slow down or we stall ourselves. So instead of using events as a landmark or a milestone, sorry, it's sort of like train for life. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when you talked about the quiet disciplines and whatnot.
yeah, I like that. I think that's something that is quite important, certainly as you get older. I think I remember growing up, some of us played team sports and that, and I remember the older guys in the team that I played with, they used to use the act of training on a Tuesday and Thursday and then playing on a Saturday as their exercise, as they're keeping fit. Whereas when I was growing up and when we were growing up, we used to train to do those things. Um, and then it's what comes after. It's something that I used to think about when I was younger, like when you can't do the rugby or the football or the boxing or wherever,
Right.
what is it that comes after? And I know we spoke recently about the last couple of boxing events that we did, and um, the way you adapt your training as you get older. is important. The way you learn to reflect on your body, not train at the age of 40 as you did at the age of 20. And so I think it's a really important point you make there about training for the purpose of life, for longevity, and not just to train for an event. Because, like you say, when that event comes and goes, then what?
That's actually a really good point because it's thinking of it that way. It's also, I think if it's train, don't get me wrong, if you've got events along the way, then you're going to train, but that's going to be part of the life training mission anyway. But even just hearing you say that, it's making me think of if we're training for an event, then there's that kind of higher expectation, and then there's that kind of low crash afterwards. Event's done now, that sort of feeling of event blues or whatever you call it, and then what? But continuing the sort of mantra of just training for life means okay, event's done, on to the next day. I still need to keep fit. Do you know what I mean? So
I mean, that was something I definitely suffered with when I did my first marathon. So I did my first marathon in 2009 in New York, and so I trained for 4 or 5 months leading up to it. There was the event, and then afterwards, I kind of like set it was because the New York Marathon is the first Sunday in November, so then it's winter. Running outside is difficult. I'm not really one for running indoors on treadmills anyway, so I kind of let it slack off, and it was a couple of years till I ran the next marathon. But then I kind of got quite addicted to it. So then I was running, and I didn't really have a break from that, which put other stresses on the body. So I think the way you approach it and your kind of take on it is important. I think certainly as you start to move through the years and the different stresses that your body goes through in terms of that.
100%, 100%. And no, being honest, I do, even though I still train regularly, I do find it a harder mission. And like you touched on about having to adapt, and it's that sort of element of having to train smarter, isn't it? Because no, I'm actually with kettlebells. I'm training a lot now, and I'm lifting heavier kettlebells than I did when I was younger. But I have to train with them in a different way, and I have to accept that my recovery isn't what it was. And what I do struggle with sometimes, if with the recovery, and if I'm not in a great state of mind, it can be easy to just think, forget training today. So that's all stuff I'm still trying to like discover and find out a better formula to to keep me in a training game for longer. So
Well, that kind of brings me on to a next point, which I was maybe going to cover a little bit further down the line. But there's this question around motivation and discipline, and like what keeps you. I mean, you've explained how you've been doing it for years. I mean, I've known you my whole life, so come best part of what 35 years more maybe.
it's crazy.
Certainly as a young man, as a teenager, it was something that you got into very early, and it's something in our early 40s that you're still doing. And so I guess the question becomes: is it motivation, or what keeps you motivated, or is it discipline? And I'd just be interested in your take on that.
Mm. Um, Interesting. Without sort of digressing, if I'll go back to when I actually started training very quickly. And I remember, so I'd left, we were walking out from college. So it was me and some of, I went to Rotherham Avenue College up in Farley Hill in Luton. We'd finished college, it was in January. And I don't know what clicked in my mind. And I just said, it was a random sort of outburst. I sort of said, I'm going to start training. I'm going to start lifting weights. It was nothing to do with what the conversation was. And everyone else just laughed and said, yeah, whatever. And that was when I was 16. And it was ever since then. And then I actually went on a little set. I was only training for 10 or 15 minutes a day, but I did that every day for 6 months. I I was going on holiday in July. I wasn't training for holiday, but I was training. And I got to a point of I thought, there's no effect. I'm not getting any bigger or whatever. And it was only when I got on holiday, then I got compliments. For, wow, we could see you're bigger and all that. And being a young guy at that age, a lot of my motivation was to look better for the opposite sex, to try and impress the ladies. So back then, that was my motivation. Obviously, I wanted to be strong anyway, and big, but that was a big part of the motivation. We'll forward on to when I was working at Sainsbury's. I remember um, I think I still had a bit of the same mentality, but it was one of my friend's uncles. Um, you remember? Can I mention names on here? Is that all good? Still? Does
Yeah,
that? I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You remember Venald, obviously, don't you?
yeah,
Yeah. So his uncle used to work with me at Sainsbury's, and I must have been talking about training or something or whatnot, and it was funny, but it was one of the best compliments, and he put it in such a way that I've always remembered. And he said, "Malcolm, you don't get it. The girls that are interested in you aren't interested just because of your body, your muscles. It's because you're actually a nice person. You've got a personality and whatnot, and you're not bad looking." Now, the reason that was important for me was because a lot of my motivation up until still then at the age of 23 was to be attractive towards the opposite sex. When he said that, it kind of took that pressure off, and it was like, well, okay, I enjoy training now, but my motivation hasn't got to be to try and impress the ladies. And then I think that was when my motivation started to change to, well, I've been training for, I think it was about 6, 7 years at that point. And it's like, A, I'm not going to let that go now. And there's not really anything ahead of me that I need to train for as such now. But then it was, well, I need to train to stay fit for life anyway. So that was kind of where the motivation for life sort of come into it. So I'll kind of digress, and I don't know if you can take anything from that, but my motivation definitely changed from that one comment of what my friend's uncle said
yeah. No, it
at
makes.
that stage.
I think it's a relevant journey and narrative for people to hear because with the way social media is today, particularly like the explosion in the fitness industry has been incredible with the prevalence of social media apps, particularly not advocating any one social media platform over another, but Instagram particularly when that became a prominent in people's lives, the explosion in the fitness industry was incredible. People who trained for a set number of weeks got shredded and then had content made to last for 12 months started to put a real kind of like strain on people in terms of body image and how they look and all the rest of it. So I do think that's an important part of understanding certainly one person's journey towards that, and then I guess it became more of a well-being thing for you because as well as the training physically, you also train yourself. I would say like mentally and spiritually, and that was the other part to that. The yin to the yang of that, the conversation I wanted to have with you today about the books that you've read, the self reflection, and the stuff that you've done around that. And again, the motivation and to do it as regularly as you do is a discipline, and I'll take it from there for now.
Yeah, so with the talk about the book thing, actually, that's a really good point you brought up because it was my mentor who introduced me to the self development, self help, whatever you want to call it. I prefer calling it personal development because I've still kind of myself stigmatized the help part of it, where I think the help part sort of puts it out there that people need help, which isn't always the case, but I think people always should be trying to develop themselves or improve themselves or look at things from a different perspective. So again, to rush through the story, I was at my mentor's house one day. He was a few years older, and we were just sitting around, a couple of drinks, talking rubbish, and he sort of turned around and said, "Can I tell you a few things?" And tell me if I'm wrong. But he said, and he sort of went through. I know that sometimes you're up, you're down, you put on a front, you put on a display, but inside, this is how I feel that you actually are. And I actually started crying because it was almost like, wow, he's seen right through me. Um, I didn't expect that coming, but he saw right through me. And then he showed me a book, and it's a book called Being Happy. Author was Andrew Matthews. So the books are, you look at the book and you think it's a kid's book because he uses cartoon images on the front of the book. But actually going through the book, it's written in such a way that anyone of any age can read them and learn from them. And for me, they were the blueprint into self development. And self development for me is arguably the biggest thing that's changed my life. because it's not about them giving me the answers to everything, but it's given me. I mean, it's I said it to people. You've got to be careful how I say it, but for me, they're my self development books are almost my version of a religious scripture that I'd follow. In the same way, someone who follow, a Christian who's devoted to reading the Bible, that's what they need. The self development books are what have kept me on track, kept me improving, and tying my reading with the training it was where I realized that it's mind and the body is one thing, or they're connected. If one of them isn't firing or functioning on a good enough level, then the other isn't. So the training and the reading is what makes me be as complete as I can in any moment.
I mean, I think that is really like profound, and I think it's not. I don't think it's in any way controversial to say that because religion is a big part of people's lives. People practice it in different ways, and they take faith and strength and guidance. And those people that don't follow religion do seek guidance and answers in other ways. And what you've explained there is a way of processing that and making it work for yourself. And I think if everyone was to look inwards, I think they would all find there's something that they look to, that they see guidance from. It's important as well. I think you said there about the connection between the mind and body. I mean, I'm a big movie fan, and Matrix is one of my favorite films. And the key thing in that is around the mind can't live without the body, and the body can't live without the mind. And so, to work on both and to develop both is an important part of well-being. So, I think that is a really important holistic link that you've picked up there. And again, it's something that I've witnessed quietly and observed over the years, and why I wanted to talk to you about it tonight.
I appreciate that. It's because like you sort of touched on at the start, it's not something I've been like, hey Jamie, I've read this book, or I've put it out there and I've tried to, I've used it to sort of lord myself over others. It's been what spilled me up to you know, where I am now. It's given me the confidence that I didn't have when I was younger. Because obviously, again, growing up, you knew that I could be very shy in instances and whatnot, but with the growth, with the learning, with the reading, which is all good, but it's putting that into practice, right? Because knowledge is nothing until you actually start using it, right? Do you know what I mean? So, and it's got me to a level where I'm confident enough to do the things I'm doing, to jump on lives or podcasts like this sort of thing and speak my truth. And that was a powerful thing for me because I used to always question how intelligent I am, or and my intelligence was always based off academics or whatever at school. But I realized my experiences, and as long as I can explain my experiences and why I feel the way I do, or anyone can explain why they feel the way they do or what they talk about, for me, that's what intelligence is. Because it's not about someone necessarily agreeing, but you can still understand someone's point of view. Now, we all know when something is completely wrong. Do you know what I mean? But it's my thing is I can explain my truth and why I feel or think the way I do, and that's where intelligence comes, because it gives you a different perspective, doesn't it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Like the education system is set up in a way that it predicates certain types of intelligence as being how we define it, and therefore, if you don't fit within those brackets, then you're not then deemed to be intelligent in those ways. And I've never really like subscribed to that because I get probably the best example of that for me is what I do for work in terms of negotiating policies and debating stuff around terms and conditions and all the rest of it. And I have a friend at work who he always used to say to me, "I can't do what you do because you just reel it off so smoothly." And the point I make to him is that it's because I do it every day.
Right, I hear that.
I'm reading these things every day. I'm dealing with it every day, and my brain is kind of tuned into how to read through a policy, what bits to pick out, understanding previous examples. Experience counts for a lot, and then being able to apply it to a current position. But he would kind of put himself down a little bit in terms of his ability and intelligence to be able to do what I do. And what I've said to him is it's more a case of because you don't do it every day. Whereas if you did read some of these things and you did look into and you sat on a course that I've sat on, very quickly you would be up to speed and be able to start doing the kind of things that I'm doing, and you would take it in your own way and develop it your own way. So I think that's probably again another hang up of the way the education system kind of sets us up when we're kids and then go into the open world.
It's a good point because I can see what your friend what he's on about from what he said in regards to he can do it because I'm thinking I couldn't do that sort of thing what you do, but you touched on that key point, didn't you, where you said about it comes down to practice and repetition. So but people a lot of the time don't look at the journey, whatever it is, like how much you've studied something or how much you've learned something to where you are now. They just see what they see in front and think he must have been a natural at it or she must have been a natural. So that's a good point. And that's something I actually still forget a lot of the time where I need to put in the work to get to a level where I can do something comfortably or more fluently. So, and again, that's the part where, we don't always learn at school. It's not always put it out in that way for us. So, yeah.
Well, even like podcasting, like take podcasting for example. So I started this in 2015, the photography side of it. When I got back to England from Oz, that's when I did the first 4 episodes of this, which were just radio editions basically. And then life gets in the way, and I didn't really pursue it. And I've tried to drive it through work in other ways, and they've created a podcast and stuff now at work. But I've then gone to watch you and see what you've been doing, and your how comfortable you are with it. But it's something that's very different for me. I mean, I've done a lot of public speaking and spoken on stage and on platforms, in front of rallies and stuff. But that's very different public speaking to sitting and organising something like this and actually getting prepared and set up for tonight. I was a little bit apprehensive about it because I was kind of measuring myself against. So I've done your podcast twice, and if you remember Ben Rookwood, I did one for him.
Yes, yeah.
COVID a few years back. So kind of like always kind of looking to other people, but then just sending yourself and think back to, they're doing it a lot. They've got experience, and you just find your own way to do it. So kind of like grounded myself before getting on.
Well, it's funny that you're saying that because this feels like a completely different experience, me being on this side. Because it's only the second time when I was doing my coaching courses, I did a podcast for it was a positive psychology episode with someone, and that was the first one. This is the second time I've been on the guest side, so this feels new to me. Do you know what I mean? It's and it goes back to what you're saying. When it's me doing my thing, I know what I'm doing. I've practiced in my mind. I know the kind of questions I want to ask, and I kind of know the experience I want to create. So, but that's come from loads of practice. Yeah. No, it's come from the voice notes, from the videos I do. So, but this is new to me. So, no, I hear it.
I also wanted to give you that opportunity as well because I do know what it's like when you're always on one side of the coin. So I thought it'd be nice to have you on as my first guest back. Then we might be coming up because this is obviously Zoom. It's cut off at like 30 or 40 minutes. So I'm going to ask you a couple of final points really just for you to kind of wrap up on. I guess the first one would be one thing that you wish you'd have known earlier in terms of the way you develop yourself now, and advice to people who feel that they're too busy or that it's too late for them to get started.
Oh, so advice that I wish I knew earlier. Was that something I knew earlier? Was it?
One thing you wish you'd known earlier about what you're doing now?
Do you know what? It's going to sound very generic and very simple, but I'm good enough to do what I want to do in the way of my social media stuff now. I really enjoy it, so that's my big thing. The cringy thing they say, that's my baby, when it's your little project or whatever you're working on. That is, I come back from my job at work, I've got an early start the next morning, and I'm doing episodes or making videos and whatnot. But what it comes down to is I never thought I'd be good enough or confident enough to do that.
Mm.
That was always for other people. But if I knew when I was younger that if I find something that I'm passionate about, I will find a way to be good enough at it. So I guess I wish I had belief in following the process years ago instead of only looking at the final destination and thinking, wow, I'll never get there. So I won't even try.
Yeah, no, that's really important.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the one piece of advice that that's something that I certainly tried to instill in the boys when they were growing up. I think that's probably a really powerful message to send out to people because, like you say, everyone
And you
sees
what? Yeah.
the end result and they don't see the journey. And actually, you can do it if you apply yourself.
And you asked something else, I think. Yeah. Did you ask, what was the other question?
The other one was advice for people who think that they're too busy or that it's too late for them to get started.
Again, so I'm 42. We're both 42, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. And too late to get started is, it's one of the things that's a load of rubbish because for me, if it's something you're passionate about and you're enjoying, then you'll make that time. You'll make that time. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And then, funnily enough, it creates more time because you're not struggling like the first few times when you were doing it. Which goes back to kind of what you're saying about with the policies you're on about you learn and you understand how to read them and how to understand them. The more we do something, the better we get at it. So, and if we're talking about time, I think then what's the motivation behind it? Because if you're thinking, I'm not going to do that because I haven't got enough time to, for example, make loads of money, then are you necessarily doing it for the right reason? I think if it's something you're doing and you're passionate about, you'll do it. You'll forget the TV show. You'll forget maybe going down the pub just for the sake of going. You'll do what you want to do. We all have the same amount of time. Again, very generic, but we'll fill that time with what's important to us after we've done the things that we have to do. Like, for example, we go to work, da, 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 da. But after that, we'll fill that time with what's important to us. Even if it's a 10-minute pocket or a 20-minute pocket, which is a lot of the time I only have a 10 or 20 minute, but I can't wait to use that time. So, we put the jigsaw puzzle together one piece at a time, don't we? So,
no, I really like that. And it's something that I've tried to apply to not necessarily everyday life. Oh, I think we might be running out of time. It says 10 minutes, I think. Still got 10 minutes. I think not necessarily something that I've applied to life, but in terms of using the training analogy where you train for an event, when I have a project or something that I want to work towards, I make a point of doing one thing every day towards achieving that goal. So some of those are longer term projects and some of them are shorter term, but every day I make sure I do something towards achieving that goal. And then, like you say, you make the time available with what you have. And once you've taken out traveling to work, working, school runs, and all the rest of it, the time that you've got left, you then apply some of that to achieving, something towards that goal.
100%. If it's important enough, you'll use whatever time you can, whatever pocket it is. So, 100%.
And I guess the final question for you, and it's quite personal to you, I guess. I guess you'd have to think about
Go
how
for it.
to answer it if you want to answer it. But
Go for it.
who are you becoming by doing the things you do
The things I do.
in terms of your well-being approaches, reading, training?
I'm all right. That's a good question. Very good question.
And it might not have a defined answer, but
Yeah, good. So that makes it easier. So what comes to mind for me? I'm someone who is slowly but surely working on the personal things that I've struggled with. So whether it's the loss of people at a young age, being like my mother, my twin, the insecurities I've had growing up, being adopted and whatnot, uh, interracially adopted, and a lot of these struggles have been things I've kept quiet. I mean, I've spoke to people very surface level about these things, but they haven't had a clue, and they rightly so, they wouldn't have a clue how much it's been. These have been like issues and burdens for me growing up, and slowly through the training to keep in shape, the reading to have a better outlook on life, and a better view of myself. To the social media stuff I'm doing now, where I am learning that there is other people that have had certain struggles and similar struggles, and I'm just another very small dot of a voice that has created an avenue for people to relate to. So I guess through I'm someone who's healing myself, and in the process, hoping other people, especially men, see that it's available to. I mean, it's acceptable to go through what they've gone through and to speak out about it. So yeah, I guess it's a journey of sort of going through a journey of sort of quiet silence, pain, whatnot, to a happier place, and realizing there's others that can come on that journey with me. And yeah,
Yeah, that's really beautiful, man.
take what you want from that.
No, look, obviously, I've been following the Man Ego, and I've been on it a couple of times, and we've spoken about some stuff. And I know that's a really important part of your journey that you're on at the minute, um, because the world is set up for men. We talk about patriarchal society, but within that, there are men that struggle, in lots of different ways. And everyone's part of an environment, through their childhood, and everyone suffers to different degrees within that. So I think the work that you're doing is really beautiful, and the spaces that you create and open for men. Even some of the conversations that we've had through your podcast, I know there's stuff that like I said, we've known each other 35 years or more, whatever it is now. There's been some things that we've spoken about in the last few months through this medium of podcasting that we haven't actually spoken about in all the time we've known each other. So there's been some stuff that's come up. I think that's quite beautiful still in its own way.
I appreciate it. I mean, the last picture, and it's something I've said a few times on my podcast, and I say it to people, and I use a pub because it's a sort of stereotypical sort of man cave environment thing, isn't it? I say, imagine the day you can go to the pub and you'll hear the geezers, the fellas, whatever, next to you on the table talking about, oh, I went through this experience, I went through that experience, or I was upset last night. But it's said in a way that's acceptable, where it's not frowned upon, it's normalized. And it's men having a healthy conversation because they're humans. Do you know what I mean? And it's, for me, that is, out of all beautiful images I picture, that's one of the things I think, when we can get to that stage where, men are comfortable to talk without it challenging, their masculinity, I think the world's taken like some really big steps forward.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a few things at work recently about masculinity, and talking about positive and toxic masculinity. And like, I guess masculinity isn't positive or toxic. It is just what it is, and it's how people apply it. And when you shut conversation down, when you shame people for wanting to talk about things,
Mm.
that's when it becomes toxic. Um, and those people do exist, unfortunately. It's certainly something that um, I can't say that it was something that negatively impacted me at work. So it's not a secret. People that know me, I took some time off work through some PTSD, with work-related trauma. And one of the things that I wanted to do was, when I was coming back to work, I wanted to tell my watch, predominantly men. We had a woman on the watch. We were quite close friends, and she knew because we've been speaking outside of the job, but I wasn't as close to the rest of the watch. And so I sat them down one day over a cup of tea and just laid it out. This is what happened. This is what I attended, and these are the incidents that I've been to that kind of come to this crescendo of why I felt like I needed some space from going out operational. And it was really well received. And actually, it was quite funny that one of the older hands on the watch, somebody who I would have maybe suspected would be a bit more disparaging about, being weak, or, um, you know, why are you talking about your feelings for? he was actually one of the more supportive people, and he had a real kind of positive approach to it. But he wouldn't have been someone that I would have necessarily gone to um, if faced with a choice. But so I think those conversations are beautiful, and I think it's high time that men started creating spaces for this kind of thing. And in some ways, this is like the old days, sitting around in a pub and talking about stuff. But time moves on and technology and stuff. But don't worry, I'll be seeing you again soon in person, and we'll be having it out.
100%, 100%,
Maybe less beers,
100%,
more teas and coffees, but
100%, my man. I thank you for having me on here today, man. Like I said, it's been a great experience. It's another great conversation, and it's practicing what's being preached. Do you know what I mean? So I appreciate it.
but thank you, Malcolm, for joining me tonight. I know it was a little bit short notice, but thank you for making the space and the time for jumping on and having this chat with me tonight. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, Malcolm Clark from Man the Ego. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my man. Thank you.
And for anyone that's listening, the podcast is officially back. I will be looking to schedule probably monthly, I think, content. And don't be surprised if you see Malcolm back in the not too distant future to talk about another subject.
My man, appreciate it. Pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Good night and bless up, everyone. Bless up.
Thank you.